All right, so taking our first look at the Launchpad Pro, we want to make sure that able to use this for production as well as live performance, that we have everything properly set up in our Midi preferences. So let's turn our attention towards Ableton Live, and we're going to navigate to our preferences. If you are on a Mac, your preferences will be located under the Live menu, which is here. And if you're on a PC, your preferences will be located under the Options menu here. I'm currently on a Mac, so I will go to my Live menu. I'll select Preferences. And my main concern right now is the MIDI preferences. So I want to make sure that in my preferences window that I select the MIDI sync tab, which is here. And once I do that, I'm going to be greeted with this little screen over here. And in the top area, it says Control Surface, Input and Output. And down here, it says Midi Ports. Now, if you have more than just the Launchpad Pro connected, if you have more than one MIDI controller connected, you'll see various ports down here, and that's totally fine. Right now, just turn your attention to the Launchpad Pro ports. And before we even get down to this, we want to look at the control surface area up here. A control surface is simply a MIDI remote script with a set of instructions that will allow your MIDI controller to communicate with Ableton Live without you actually setting anything up. So the beauty of using these control surface scripts means that you can purchase a controller, plug it in, and start using it instantly. And the Launchpad Pro has one of these MIDI remote scripts that you can find under control surfaces. So if Launchpad Pro doesn't automatically show up when you plug it in, go into your MIDI preferences, under control surface, select Launchpad Pro. And then make sure under input and output, you're also going to select Launchpad Pro. Now you might notice there's two different ports I can choose from. There's a Launchpad Pro Live port and a Launchpad Pro MIDI port. We're going to select the Live port for now. Okay, we'll revisit this other port later, but for now, make sure your input as well as your output are set to Launchpad Pro Live port. Last thing we need to do before we leave this preference area is we want to make sure that in our MIDI ports that the input and output for the Launchpad Pro Live port, the top one, we want to make sure that certain things are enabled over here. We have track, sync, and remote. What track does is allows you to control certain things that are on the MIDI track that it's currently selected and armed. So for instance, if you have a MIDI track with a piano sound on it, you can arm that track and control that instrument and any parameters on that instrument. Sync means that your MIDI controller will either send or receive MIDI clock from Ableton Live. The Launchpad Pro's pads actually pulse in time with your tempo, so having sync on for the output is helpful, and we'll just leave it on for the input as well. We also have remote here. Remote will allow you to MIDI map certain buttons on your controller to things that may not be on that particular MIDI track that's currently active. So we want to make sure that track and remote are both on for the input port as well as the output port. We also want to make sure that sync is on at least for the output port, because again, it's going to allow our Launchpad Pro's pads to pulse in time with our tempo. We don't need sync on for the input, but I'm just going to leave it on for now because it's not going to cause any harm. If your preferences look like this, track and remote on for the input, track, sync, and remote on for the output, you're ready to start using your Launchpad Pro. So with this set up, let's close our preferences and get to work.